Dark Link is one of the most mysterious enemies in the Zelda series. He's stylish, he's tough, and he's barely in any of the games. We all have questions about him, but I wanted to find an answer to the biggest one. What is he really? To find out, I decided to do something a little reckless. Using an enemy randomizer for Ocarina of Time, I created a world where every single enemy was replaced with Dark Link. My goal was to see how he'd behave outside of his single scripted encounter. The result wasn't just a harder challenge, it was a broken one. And the way it broke reveals something fundamental about how Dark Link was built from the ground up. But before we get to the chaos, let's go back to the one place he was meant to be. As the mini-boss of the Water Temple, Dark Link is given one of the most striking rooms in the game. The atmosphere, the clones suddenly appearing behind you. It's cinematic, memorable, and tough. Most players recall being frustrated, every slash countered, every weapon deflected. He has new moves, he reads your inputs, and he feels smarter than anything else in the game. At this point, it's pretty common knowledge that his health pool mirrors yours. If you have 8 hearts, he takes 8 hits. If you have 3, it's just 3. But that's only scratching the surface of how weird this enemy actually is. Because Dark Link is broken. Not just in the game-breaking sense, though we'll get to that, but in a way his very existence reveals something strange and completely unintended. And to understand what's really going on, we need to see what happens when Dark Link is placed everywhere he was never supposed to be. Methods of accessing the data within Ocarina of Time's game files have come a long way, especially recently. Thanks to modern tools, specifically the Ship of Harkinian decompilation, we have much more control over every single asset in the game. One tool inside Ship is the enemy randomizer, which lets you replace nearly every enemy in the game with another, mixing them into locations they were never meant to occupy. And yes, that includes Dark Link. So I created a seed where every enemy in the game is replaced with Dark Link, and what happened next was immediate chaos. Here's the first discovery. Dark Link is the only enemy in the game that takes fall damage. If he walks off a cliff, he screams like Link and crumples on impact, and your hearts tick down. It's funny, then it's weird, then it's terrifying. Especially when multiple Dark Links spawn in a room and fall at once. If 3 of them take fall damage, that's 3 hits to your health bar, instantly. In challenge runs like No Hit or 3 Heart, that's a disaster. So why does this happen? The answer is both simple and deeply weird. Dark Link wasn't coded from scratch like the Stalfos or Deku Baba. He's a copy of the player's code, with a dark texture and an enemy flag flipped on. You take fall damage because he takes fall damage. The game doesn't see him as an enemy taking a fall. It sees Link taking a fall and deducts the health accordingly. He's not just mirroring you. On a fundamental level, the game thinks he is you. Let me show you. Outside of the Water Temple's mirrored lake, you start to notice behaviors that only make sense if Dark Link is just Link in enemy form. This goes beyond his combat moves. Dark Link retains all of Link's idle animations, including the rare animation of him sneezing in cold areas. A very unusual one was in the Tektite Grotto. You can guide him onto the warp pad, and he'll look up into the light, just like Link does when he expects to be warped out. He can jump, climb, swim, and even dive for the base 3 seconds. In this seed, I gave myself a full inventory, including the gold scale, so even though I could dive for 9 seconds, Dark Link still only used the base 3. There's also a unique animation if you stun him while he's climbing a ledge. He gets knocked back, just like Link, and has to pick himself up off the ground. This shared identity even goes beyond animations. It bleeds into your equipment. While most items have no effect, the game's logic creates one very specific exception: the Iron Boots. When you put them on, Dark Link slows to a crawl, perfectly matching your new speed. The game is reading Link's status as is wearing Iron Boots, and applying the speed penalty to both of you. Unfortunately, this doesn't cause him to sink, it was only the speed change from the Iron Boots. We tried the hover boots as well, but they had no effect on his traction or jumping. Oddly, there is a glitch where your movement speed resets if he exits swimming while you're wearing the Iron Boots. This may be due to a ship-specific setting, but it's still interesting. As expected, most items Dark Link dodges or they pass right through him, but there are outliers. Din's Fire is especially strange. If you use it while they are swimming, it knocks them back, but they land in a swimming animation, becoming stuck in a loop of floating upwards and perpetually diving. We let this go on for as long as was reasonable, and they floated up into the skybox to a ridiculous height. I imagine if this were the N64 version of Ocarina of Time, the coordinates would eventually reach an unacceptable number and crash the console. But at least in the ship of Harkinian, that limit was never reached. This left a majority of the landlocked Darklings confused about which animation they were supposed to be doing. Another interesting feature is that all Darklings seem to operate on the same routine. As a result, they share a death flag, so when one is killed, all of them are forcibly despawned, even the ones floating way up in the sky. There is one other item that causes some strange behavior, and that's Nehru's love. Specifically, if they spawn while you are under its shield, they don't approach or engage, taking on exclusively defensive positions. However, if you do kill a Darkling while Nehru's love is active, the death flag doesn't fully activate. The one you killed just lies on the ground, permanently locked onto you wherever you move. A single broken corpse is creepy, but the problems escalate exponentially when the game tries to manage a room full of them. This is where their shared programming goes from a strange quirk to a catastrophic failure, and it starts with their spawn points. So while this is a lot of fun, an enemy randomizer with this many Darklings causes complications that wouldn't otherwise be apparent. The spawn point is shared among all Darklings. When they spawn, they appear at the enemy location they were shuffled with, but then the game forces them all to stack on the first Darkling that spawned. In this case, whichever one is in enemy zero's location. If that enemy happens to have a high vertical spawn position, like a bird or a bat, all of the Darklings will appear in an elevated spot and then plummet, transferring the fall damage to you no matter where you are on the map. You can see how a challenge run like this would be difficult, especially when death is on the line. But it gets worse. One of the other strange effects Darkling has is that he can actually void out. In the fire trial room, there are normally torch slugs and red bubbles, but if you swap all enemies with Darkling, enemy 0 actually spawns in a location underground where a red bubble waits, and all other Darklings try to zip to that location. It turns out Darkling's behavior is the same as Link's, and touching lava voids him out immediately. And when the room reloads, it happens again, and again, and again, and again. With infinite health, this was a soft lock. With a finite health pool, it was certain death. It has a similar effect in Death Mountain Crater, where if Darklink backflips into the lava, Link is the one who voids out. It's not just lava either. Darklink will also void out if crushed. In the Spirit Temple, the Darklings spawn and try to zip to location 0, but one gets stuck behind the silver block in a pit it can't escape. If you push the block on top of him Looney Tunes style, it crushes him, and once again, you void out. I've known for years that Darkling's health mirrors yours, but I never imagined the connection ran this deep. That his falls, his stumbles, even being crushed by a block were all fundamentally tied to my own health bar. It's an incredible look at the seams of the game. But what happens when those seams tear completely? While many rooms exhibited odd behavior with only Darklings as enemies, a large number of them completely failed to load, crashing the game before the door even opened. It seems that rooms requiring you to kill all enemies, either to unlock a door or spawn a chest, were too much for the game to process. This is probably because all Darklings share the same death flag, so if the game needs every enemy to be killed in advance, it can't recognize when they're all actually cleared. More testing would need to be done to truly understand why this is the case, but this aligns with what we now know about Darkling. Interestingly, the game actually tries to avoid this. If Darklink is part of the enemy pool but Deku Babas are also available, it will only spawn Deku Babas in those rooms. The moment the only option is Darklink, that's when the room breaks. So while we're talking about things that don't work, let me satisfy some of your likely burning questions. Magic arrows? Pass right through. Deku Nuts can stun, especially if bounced off a wall. Bombs and bomb chews? No effect. Hammer and Dins? Strong as ever. Beyond the inventory, Darklink sadly takes no damage from a storm of chickens, as much as I wanted that to be true. Epona cannot deal any damage to them by running them over, but they do still try to damage you while you're on Epona. Infinite Sword Glitch causes them to backflip endlessly, and they are effectively unkillable because of this. They also do not void out from mid-air void zones, such as normal pits, but they do fall to a floor of some sort and take that annoying fall damage. And finally, they do seem to feel the effects of floor-based lava or poison, but it doesn't deal any actual damage to either of us. At this point, you'd think it couldn't get any weirder. A doppelganger that transfers fall damage and can kill you from across the room is already bizarre. But we've saved the most baffling discovery for last. Forget broken mechanics. let's talk about the few enemies that actually interact with Dark Link and affect you as a result. First off is the Skulltula. If Dark Link gets within the range of its spin, you'll take the knockback damage, even if you aren't close. This is unlikely to happen though, as you have to trigger the Skulltula into its combat phase first. But if Dark Link gets near it at this point, you will take the knockback no matter where you are in the room. And of course, the wildest of all is the like. Apparently, Dark Link is enough of a link to trigger a like slurping animation, even if you, the player, are far away. This means that if a like and a Dark Link are in the same room, there is a very real possibility the like will pull you into it, regardless of where you stand. The two make a hellish combo. And here's the kicker. The like doesn't even touch Dark Link. It triggers its attack on the nearby Link entity, and the game, seeing this, simply applies the getting eaten state to you. It reaches across the entire room, pulls you in, because as far as the code is concerned, you and your shadow are one and the same. From fall damage transferred from across the map, to void outs triggered by your clone, to being eaten by an enemy that isn't even near you. This is more than just a series of glitches. At this point, it's hard to even call him a proper enemy. He's a mirror, technically and literally. And all of these bizarre interactions point to one simple truth about his design. So what does this all mean? At the end of the day, Dark Link isn't really an enemy. The developers just duplicated Link and stripped out what they didn't need. It's efficient, it worked, and it got the job done for one room. But once you pull him out of that room, the edges start to show. This is what makes mods and randomizers so interesting. They reveal the shortcuts, hacks, and last-minute solutions that were never meant to be seen. In that one perfect room in the water temple, he holds together. Everywhere else, he turns into a rogue experiment. And for players like us, that's more than enough reason to mess around.